mean, there was really nothing more to it except I had come up high on some cocaine. I needed to come down. I found some pills and I figured this is really, really painful, this life. So I'm going to take these pills. I did that, somehow got to the hospital, don't remember. And I remember the psychiatrist saying, they kind of give you this, they pump your, they do this charcoal thing. And then he said, are you going to do this again? I said, no, I'm not. And then they said, okay, discharge. And they let me go. I think I did. And it was actually a cry for help. And I really knew that if I was going to get help, I would have to do it myself. I would have to reach out and make that decision on my own.
Welcome to the 1000 Day Sober Podcast. My name is Lee Davey. I am not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I am someone that doesn't drink alcohol. And I spend every waking moment of my life helping other people do the same. Like right now. Wham, bam, thank you, man. Who are we going to be talking to today? No messing about. We're just going to get straight into it. We're going to be talking to Joy Andreoli. Joy is the author of The Recovery Cycle, a contemporary guide that blasts open the blocks to keep sober people from reaching their greatest potential for all addictions and any program. All right. So listen closely. This wonderful woman from California, she's going to get into a lot of stuff that is in her book and really share her story and her journey into the depths of despair and then climbing back out again, and how she turned that around to create this incredible offering to you good people. And if you want to know more about Joy Andreoli, then email me at thestrivemethod@gmail.com and I will put you in touch with this wonderful lady, okay? And also check out the show notes for ways to get a copy of her book and get into contact with her. So without further ado, I'll shut the hell up and leave you in the capable hands of Joy Andreoli and myself having a good old chin wag about all things alcohol addiction. Okay, folks, I'm here with a beautiful Joy Andreoli. Where does that name come from, Joy? Everything about it is spelt differently than my brain is used to.
Well, Andreoli is Italian. That's where my grandfather is from. And Joy is Joi, is from my mother. I think there's Joy Lansing. There was an actor. She was way ahead of her time. So spelling the names, all the different names, Tom, Taum, whatever. So she spelled my name like some actress way back in the day.
Ah, really interesting. My wife was telling me yesterday how her parents came over to America from Korea and decided to name all their kids after famous actresses and actors. My wife's called Liza after Liza Minnelli. There was Peter Parker, Linda Carter, Julie Andrews.
Very funny.
Yeah, I love it. So what part of the world did you fall into, and how did that mark you as a woman?
Interesting question. What part of the world did I fall into? So where was I born? I was actually born in Hollywood. I think that's what you're asking, where I come from. Yeah. And I grew up actually in, I would consider my hometown Dana Point, California. It's a beach town. And, lots of surfing, lots of alcohol, lots of cocaine at the time. It was the 70s and early 80s. So it was, and the 60s, actually, that's where my mom's era, that's where I was at the time.
So you grew up in an environment where taking addictive substances was just part of the course, as they say.
Well, I would say par for the course for the group that I fell into. And what I saw around me. So it was like, it was a way for me to feel comfortable just with whoever I was. The smart kids, or the kids, even the drama kids, that was where I wanted to go. But I was way too shy because, I say that people weren't sources of love. It's what I did with the messages that I got. So that's how it was my entree into the world of alcohol and drugs was it was a comfort level that I achieved immediately. And then I saw my siblings, my older siblings, drinking and doing drugs. So it kind of made a lot of sense. I looked up to them.
It's funny, isn't it, when these conversations we have around drinking or drugs and recovery, they're pretty much, most of them are pretty much the same, right? It's pretty much the same in as much as we just did what everybody else did because that's what people did, right? It's like if I don't do these things that other people are doing, then what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my survival amongst this species? I'm going to be cast out. Nobody's going to like me. And it just, the more and more I interview people and talk to people, and the more and more I coach people, it just seems to be the norm to be addicted, not an unusual thing. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, but when I look back, I think I remember I have you're making me think of this one memory of I had a girlfriend and it was younger. It was when I hadn't even entered high school yet. But I remember going to her house and spending the night. And it was the most normal family. They had classical music playing in the background. She played the piano. They had a dinner hour and we all sat down for dinner, and it was excruciatingly uncomfortable for me. It was excruciating uncomfortable for me. I think so much so that I think I actually called my mother to say, come pick me up and take me home. And so I'm not so sure if it's everybody was doing it. It was a way, I just ended up with the people that were doing it because I found it a solution to my discomfort with people. So if I had found a way to feel comfortable with people, I'm not so sure I would have gone down that road. That said, I do believe that there's a genetic component to addiction or alcoholism. And I certainly have that in my history as well. So, both of my siblings are sober and had a problem. So I don't know for sure if I could just say, oh, it was them. It's kind of like I can't say blame the parents or there was something in me that happened that I just couldn't stop. And I ended up with those people. And really, the other thing was I didn't want to. I didn't want to continue on that road. And I remember going to a funeral of a 15-year-old who had a problem and drove off a cliff. I was 2 years old, 1 or 2 years older than him. And I went with the family. And all of us that were going to that wake actually were, we kind of couldn't wait there because we knew there were going to be drugs. We knew there was going to be a lot of drinking, including the mother of the person that died. So I knew in my heart and what I valued that something was wrong with that. And, So I don't know if that's a little different from what you were saying, but I certainly feel that there was something in me that led me to these people.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm learning as I evolve, this man ape of me evolves, is what you're talking about there is a level of self-awareness I just did not have as a youngster, and I think that self-awareness stroke critical thinking lens. I would go so far to say that in my working class upbringing and that kind of social structure, it wasn't really the way that we were designed and created. We were more like the guys in the Matrix, the guys and girls in the Matrix who didn't know they were in the Matrix. You sound like there was a little bit of Thomas Anderson about you as you was growing up. And my wife is from California, and I've been lucky enough to see her side of the family, which is more academic and more into critical thinking and less likely to go down the same road that I went. So I'm kind of seeing both sides of how, this whole addiction monster can unfold or not. Because I do have like lots of friends who are like super woke, super with it, super yoga leotardy, super zen meditation masters, and they all still get wankered every weekend on alcohol, thinking it's normal. I mean, that's the thing that draws me, my whole philosophy around. Yeah, this is a biggie. This alcohol thing is a biggie. But when did you realize you had to change something? Then when did you realize? I mean, you mentioned the wake there, but when did it get to a point where this is a real problem for me? What happened?
Well, I knew the moment that I took a drink. I just have to say that. I knew
Right.
that eventually I'd have to quit or it was going to kill me because it felt way too good. It just
Right.
felt way too good. But when I knew was, when I did something was actually after I was ended up in, on a suicide attempt, and they let me go, and I didn't really know what to do, and so pretty quickly thereafter, I went to. I think I must have gotten drunk again a couple of more times, and I ended up I put myself in a recovery facility, a state-run recovery facility, which was in Dana Point, and I put myself in for 3 months. So I knew before my 21st birthday, which here in California, that's the legal age to drink. And, I had been using fake IDs for a while, but so that's when I knew. And that's when I did something. But like I said, I knew really early on.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that it got to that point. Is that something you talk about, or is it private to you, the suicide attempt?
It's just, I'm talking about it now. So it was something that maybe I even talk about it in my book. I don't know, but I don't remember. There's really nothing more to it except I had come up high on some cocaine. I needed to come down. I found some pills and I figured this is really, really painful, this life. So I'm going to take these pills. I did that, somehow got to the hospital, don't remember. And I remember the psychiatrist saying, they kind of give you this, they pump your, they do this charcoal thing. And then he said, "Are you going to do this again?" I said, "No, I'm not." And then they said, "Okay, discharge." And they let me go. Oh, I think I did. And it was actually a cry for help. And I really knew that if I was going to get help, I would have to do it myself. I would have to reach out and make that decision on my own. And that's what I know. You coach a lot of people, and that's the one thing that's critical is making that decision that I need help and then following it up with action. I'm big on action. If you know anything about me, I'm big on taking that action. So at that point, I just suppose I was ready to take the action shortly thereafter. I didn't want to die because I knew it was only going to go two ways. It was going to go death or somehow get into some sort of recovery program, which I did. I really knew that was where it was going to end up for me.
What was the great debate around that time? So you make a decision that you had that near miss, we'll call it, where everything nearly ended, and then there's this realization, this spark that's always been there that this is not good for me. I need to kind of get out of it. But was there a debate? Was there some questions? Was there a difficulty in getting away from it? I mean, there's a difference between the journey and the slog and the grind and the struggle of kind of like getting to where you want to be. But for some people, there's also a real challenge within themselves to even get to the starting line, right? It's like, yeah, I want to quit, but I really love it. It's like, was there a part of that in your journey that you had to deal with?
I think I had dealt with that, like I said, from the very first time I took a drink until the time I finally made that decision to get sober. What I knew was going to have to happen. So I really did. I had years with that struggle.
Right.
Years.
Mm.
So by the time I got sober, it was as if I knew that I was going to need to somehow work through my fears around being with people. I didn't talk for 12 years in meetings unless somebody, told me to or asked me to, or so I knew that was going to be really big, that I would have to finally figure out how to get comfortable within myself and with other people.
Mm.
And at that time, people kind of force themselves on you, like you go that at that time, there was only the 12-step program. That was basically it. Maybe there was another fringe program, and now there's so many, which is great, because it really kind of invites a lot of people for whatever their belief system or whatever works for them into recovery and in this transformed life. But at that time, when I got sober, it was a 12-step program. Somebody assigned me. She said, I'm going to be your sponsor. And I just did what she said because I figured she seemed like she was doing it. She was successful enough and she seemed to have all the answers. So I kind of just went with it. I just kind of surrendered to this idea that there was going to be a better way, and that there was, love in the world in a new way that I was going to be able to experience. And that has been my experience. And it hasn't been by somebody just saying, do it my way, do it this way, do it that way. Really, I've got to discover my own journey and what's in my own heart in this process. So, and it's a continuing process. I continue to live this cycle, as you probably know, that I really believe that there's a cycle for whatever program anybody chooses in transforming within myself, my relationships, everything in my life.
What was your sponsor like? Like, was she hard? You get these stories.
And is she like? Is she?
Oh,
like?
still okay. Do you have her forever then? Forgive my ignorance.
Something. We have a great friendship, and she's still somebody that I confide in. That has you're a coach. What I say to people is, you find somebody with a trustworthy record. You take a risk on people until they prove they have a trustworthy record. If you're just going to trust somebody, or they're going to, I'm not going to just do what everybody tells me to do. Although she tells me that you kind of did what she told me to do in the beginning. I was really young. So I did do the things. It wasn't going to harm me. Calling her wasn't hurtful. So yes, I still to this day. And like you said, some people are real hardline. It works for some people. That kind of doesn't work for me. But that's okay. There's a lid for every pot.
Yeah. I had a moment.
It looks like you don't like that.
No. I had a moment the other day where a couple of people in my community, they were just about to take a course of action, which I felt was a mistake. And there was my masculine fixed energy came up, and I wanted to fly in there like a superhero and course correct them. And I think like a few years ago, that would have been my MO for sure, right? And then this time I was able to say, hang on a minute, this is not going to work. Like, this is not going to work for these people, right? Like, it's not going to work. You're just going to annoy them. You're going to piss them off. You're going to actually make things worse, right? Like, you need to have a different course of action. So that's what I was thinking of when I was asking you about your sponsor. I'm always interested in how some people really flourish through, the whole kind of like getting whipped. And then there's those that really flourish with being reminded that everything that they have in order to succeed is within themselves, and to trust that they've got it, right? Like that's another. There's loads of different ways of going about it. I'm being a bit polarizing here, but really interests me how people react differently.
But something, the being whipped part, like what that I believe can imagine, or I believe I know what you're talking about. And what I think that does, it just instills more fear. So the fearful part of me is now going to, be afraid to be autonomous and have kind of my own self-directed life. And that's why it doesn't work for me. And as I think fear is really at the core of a lot of addiction, a lot of why people feel the need to do it somebody else's way. They don't know how to, to make decisions on their own. Ideally, we learn in recovery to, if we're helping others and ourselves, to foster somebody's decision-making process. So I like to call them, it's the pros and cons, the prices and the prizes. What's the highest, throwing out options. What's the highest possible price you're going to pay for doing that? And what's the prize? And then look at it, everything, look at whatever decision from all angles, because people do have the answer within themselves. And if they don't, I believe it will soon enough come, and if we make a mistake, okay, move on. We make a mistake.
Who's not going to make a mistake, right? It's particularly in this gig. I mean, come on, right? It's like, it's that old paradox, and it's like we don't want to talk about relapse, but we kind of have to talk about relapse because, for a lot of people it happens, right? And
it does.
Yeah, it happens.
Relapse happens, and for sure. And it's get back up on the horse. Again, do I want to continue with this? And what led me to that? What got in the way of me maintaining my vision of my sobriety or my recovery for that day? Because what is recovery? It's like, it's a process of regaining, I think, of regaining something that's lost, or of, returning to a normal state of health and mind and wellness. And what's lost is our connection to our souls. So how did I lose that connection when I relapsed? When I first put myself in that recovery home, after a week, they said, you need 3 months. And I said, no, I can do it in a week. So I went to detox for a week, and I said, I got this covered. I know what to do. I went back out, and within a week I was smoking chokers and doing all kinds of crazy things. So then I put myself back in for 3 months, and it was like having to, and they didn't let me talk to my family for a month. He said, you cannot have any contact with them. And it's like needing a complete shift in my thinking. I needed to have, something else getting in there besides my own brain. Like Einstein says, we can't solve the problem with the brain that created it. And that was definitely wanting me, out of fear, to go out and use again. So for these people that relapse, I would say, look, what do you think happened there? Let's look at it. Let's take a blow by blow account and look and see what happened. And sometimes people don't even know. Sometimes people don't know.
Yeah.
But if it's scary enough, they might want to return back to recovery. And in my world, it means it's a process of being an observer of my thoughts and my feelings, and my actions progressively aligning with what I value and what I hold dear. So I can observe, and now I can align what I know is in my heart, who I want to be, what I want to do. Now I can align my actions, and it's a progressive. It doesn't happen like, oh, now that I want to be, the best possible wife who's just completely kind and loving in all moments. It doesn't mean that that's going to happen. I might, that animal part of me might come out, but I can course correct because I have this ability to observe my thoughts and my feelings. And I think we can only do that when we are sober. We don't have, at least I can only do that when I don't have a chemical in my body kind of muddying up me.
Yeah, I'll second that.
What are you thinking about? I see you looking. What are you thinking?
What was I thinking about? I was thinking that I was thinking, and because I was thinking I wasn't grounded and paying attention, I was thinking that. That can happen from time to time. I had a question I was going to ask you, which took me out of my present moment. I apologize. It was if you had any thoughts around. So my relapse, for example, happened maybe 3.5 years after I stopped, and it was a kapow moment. So it was like divorced. Holy shit! Don't have a mental map for this. Relapse. Month later, what an idiot. Never again in the next 10 years. So there's that type of relapse, but then there's another relapse I see, which I feel is more challenging to overcome, and that's the continual relapse. So day 1, day 2, day 3, drink. Day 1, day 2, drink. Day 1, day 2, 3, 10, drink. Like, I was wondering in your work and your practice and your research, whether or not you've looked at those two different types of phenomena and you had anything to say on it, really.
That's a good question. I mean, I'm thinking about the people that I worked with or people that I know, and there's one individual I'm thinking of. He has, what do they call him? He spent years. He kept relapsing. It was just like you were describing. He would get maybe a month and then he'd go back out for a month. And now he's like 3.5 years, something like that. And for him, he just said, I like to ask people because I think everybody has a different answer. And he said, my story, he said, I don't know. It just happened. He said, I was just done. So I don't really have I don't have a full answer for that. I don't know. I think it's a big mystery as to why people get sober, why people continue to relapse. I know some people, I know one woman I'm thinking of, she was doing everything. She was in her program. She was doing the work. She was contacting other people. She was working with others, kind of like you do. And boom, she went out. That was after 10 years. So, but I will say this, that I think there are 3 reasons people go out. And maybe I'd love to know from you if this is like keeping secrets, not continuing the recovery program, whatever it is, whether it's 12-step or rational recovery or what you do, something, not continuing with the program, or medication that's gotten out of hand. People take painkillers and things like that as needed, and that can get out of hand. So those 3 reasons seem to be the reason why a lot of people go out. As far as relapsing, I don't know. But as far as you had 3.5 years. Did you say that? 3.5 years?
Yeah, I went 3.5 years, and then mine was I got divorced from a 15-year marriage, 20-year relationship, and then I fell in love again, and I had this just this real worry. It was very, very unhealthy and dysfunctional, but this really inner child part of me that was really worried that this new person that I found would leave me if she didn't find me interesting, and that I would. And this was my one and only shot. I remember telling myself that I was ugly, that all the best women in the world were taken, and so there was a real unhealthy part of me that was basically latching onto my wife in a bid to not feel so lonely, right? Like, how selfish is that when you think about it in a cold light of day, right? So I just got terrified and I drank in order for her not to find me uninteresting, which was bizarre because she just thought I was the right idiot. And it was actually my son, my 10-year-old son at the time, who said, "Dad, I thought you told me that alcohol had no value." I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, what are you drinking for?" And I think the whole embarrassment of it with my son really, after that, I haven't had anything to drink for over 10 years. And I don't even think about it. But interestingly, when I gave up smoking, it was an external motivator So I tried and failed so many times, relapsed so many times, stopping smoking. I thought it was the hardest thing in the world. And then my wife got pregnant with my son. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm never going to smoke again. And I never have. And he's 22. And I never, and this is where me and you may differ a little bit. So I never craved cigarettes from the moment I made the vow to stop, and I never craved alcohol from the moment that I vowed to stop. Other than that isolated incident when my wife left me. So, I steer more away from the genetic side of it being a big thing for me, because I can't get over the question of like the genetics and the whole biology of addiction. I can't get over the hurdle that 1 minute I'm an absolute freaking addict that cannot stop. And then I read a book and the next day I have no craving. Like for me, it's like biologically, how is that possible? I don't know the answer. It's not one that I go down a rabbit hole really looking at, but it does mean that I'm more apt to focus more on thoughts and feelings versus biology, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think that this idea of, it's a great point that you make, right? Because cravings are they're a biological event, right? So how does that happen? Where one day you have that and the next day you don't? I didn't either. I kind of was done. With smoking, it was really tough. I really identify with that. I gave up smoking 5 years in. Oh my God, it was harder than giving up drinking. But yeah, you bring up a really good point. And, Dan Siegel, if you know who he is, he's written a number of great books. Mindsight. He's written, he's written a number of books. He talks about, he says the mind is a relational and an embodied process that regulates the flow of energy and information. So that's it's a process, right? Your mind. The brain is this physical structure. So those are two different things in his world. And I believe that too. So some people, when they get sober, and you probably, if you've been to a 12-step program, some people think, oh, I was struck sober. This psychic change happened. In some ways it happened to me, I think, but mine was very slow. But so the psychic, some people believe that it's this spiritual kind of event. And that said, like you said, I read a book and then the next day, I just had no craving at all. So I would say if I'm talking to somebody who has a problem with this idea of sort of this psychic change that has no basis in science or biology, or that's basically a spiritual event. If they have a problem with that, it's okay to say, hey, your brain, like it sounds like your brain took in some information.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a process that happened with you in this book and maybe what you were thinking about. And boom, it just had that much of an effect on you physically. I mean, how often has somebody, now I'm just thinking, how often has somebody said something to me when I've been down? They say something, I can take it in and I feel better. So I guess what I'm saying is this idea of some people have all different ways of looking at getting sober, whether it's a spiritual, whether it's...
And that's the beautiful thing about it. There are so many different ways, right?
Exactly. There are so many different ways, and people will find what resonates with them. And I support anything that helps. And as far as it being like, oh, it's a disease or the biology, I just say, if it's a problem for you in your life, it doesn't matter what the origin is, a dysfunctional belief, whatever it is, do you know what? Just stay sober a day and then start to sit with yourself a little bit, connect with others, and that'll all work itself out if we do that over enough days.
I'm going to share a couple of things with you, reflections on that actually, that come up I think are important. Mine wasn't, I've interviewed people who've had that spiritual they've been to a meeting or some things happen, and it's like almost like their decision to stop drinking is a spiritual event. Mine wasn't quite like that. I think for me, there was a perfect storm of lots of different things happening at the same time that led to me looking at this addiction differently. And I'm going to ask you about addiction in a minute when I turn to your book, actually. But before I do that, one of the things that I have a working theory on at the moment, because I'm seeing it more and more, and certainly within myself, is my dysfunction and my trauma actually ended up being used for a power of good. It enabled me to defeat addiction. So one of my dysfunctions and inner child issues and traumas is being controlled, or being told what to do, or feeling dominated by somebody, right? Or being at a disadvantage that I can do nothing about. So when I was young, people call me a chink. And I was like, I had a real problem with that, because I can't help the fact that I'm 53% Chinese. There's nothing I can do about it. And how unfair is that you're making me feel like I'm different? So I don't like to be controlled. When I read the book, it was Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking Permanently, and I believed him that there was no value in smoking. Like I went through the thought experience myself. I physically smoked cigarettes, and I asked for the first time in 20 years, do I like this? When I realized there was no value in it, and I realized that actually the only reason I was smoking is because I was addicted to nicotine, I had a real problem with that. And I was able very, very quickly to just say that is not my reality anymore. Like I'm done with this thing controlling me. I'm very similar to alcohol. Like when I made the decision to stop drinking alcohol, I just said, this thing is not controlling me anymore. So I kind of use my dysfunction. I don't like to be controlled. I'm not going to let this thing control me. At the same time, that same dysfunction creeps into my relationship with my wife, where I'm like, you're not going to try to control me. And it's a mess, just to let people know that. The other thing that I wanted to say was one of my recent struggles on off has been sugar. I won't even call it, it's not a struggle, a choice. I choose to eat lots of sugar a lot, and then I choose to stop. And recently I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to eat sugar in October, but I'm going to do this differently, because I know that I can do it, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm actually going to be really, really focused and dialed in on my cravings. And do you know what I found, Joy?
What?
There's nothing going on.
What do you mean?
Like the clock strikes 7. I put my daughter to bed. I walk into the kitchen like a robot. I get ice cream and I eat it.
Yeah, I'm not laughing, but yes, I'm
right?
laughing.
Yeah. When I am then focused and trying to dissect the craving, I ask myself, how am I feeling? What's going on in my body right now?
Good.
And I'm realizing there's nothing going on there that is craving and desiring ice cream. I'm just going to get ice cream because I'm the guy who gets ice cream at night. Now, this is just me. It might be different to everybody else. Similar thing with alcohol and cigarettes for me. There was no battle with a craving because there was no craving. I was just an automaton. I was a robot. This was almost like you got about ritualizations in your book. This was a negative ritualization that once I broke it and I just said to myself, no, you can only go and have ice cream if the world is going to end. If you don't have ice cream, there's no world ending event going on inside his body. So my challenge to anyone listening is, hey, just get present a moment. And I know that we all have this story that cravings are like tsunamis and they go up and just what is it for you? Not the books, not the stories, not the podcast, not the 12 steps, everyone telling you what they do in another. What is going on for you? And I think a lot of people bypass it and just go straight to drink, when I think they really do have the power within them it's not a tsunami. Sometimes it's going to be a ripple, and you can deal with a ripple.
Absolutely. I mean, you described like what at least I think the definition of recovery, this process of being able to observe my thoughts and my feelings, slow down enough, and my actions then progressively align with what I value and I hold dear. You want a healthy body, it sounds like. You don't want to do that. And what a beautiful description of, I mean, you really had the beautiful way of describing and tying the drinking, the smoking, and the sugar, all those things. It sounds like they were, in a sense, just habits. And I don't mean that to minimize it, because I think
they were.
they're habit, but they're destructive, right? And from what I know is people that have this compulsive personality that, we want to channel this creative energy, but often it's destructive. It's self-destructive. And I would say addicts are notoriously self-destructive, right? When they're drinking, and then when they sober up, they get these crazy relationships. They're overeating. God knows I did all of my share of that. I smoked, I drank, and I wouldn't go to meetings unless I had donuts and cigarettes and coffee, So I totally get that. So the idea is to take some other actions, but we have to slow down enough, like you did, take the time. I remember when I was like, okay, I had upgraded from gallons of ice cream to, and I talk about that, the ice cream addict in the, but gallons of ice cream to, only fructose, to then I would do only, yogurt, frozen yogurt, right? And I'd call this person, I'd say, I can't stop this yogurt. And she'd say, oh, all you need is a little love. All you need is love. Why don't you stop? It's like I was, and then it was like one day I just, what I did is I visualized. It's like what I did with smoking. I visualized my lungs getting pink again. So I used, you used, you sat and you really thought about what your motive was and what it was doing for you, and you said that there was nothing. You looked at your craving. What I did was to stop it, I had to visualize something different for myself, my body, my lungs getting pink again. Do I really want to put all those chemicals in my body? Now that I was in frozen yogurt, but I thought, okay, no sugar. If I use all that chemical stuff, that's an upgrade. Well, it really isn't. But, I just visualized my organs working so hard. I almost gave them these personalities. They're working very hard to keep this body healthy. And then I'm just dumping crap in it. Yeah. So that's how I did it. That's how I got over my secondary addiction of food, actually, of sugars. And it was really painful. That was really hard. And it's not a problem for me today. It's really a non-issue. And I'm so grateful for that. I really never thought I would be doing that the rest of my life, because we've got to eat.
I think what you just explained there is super powerful. And it actually loops in Dan Siegel a little bit, because if we had this emotional brain and we have this rational brain, and when we're in the craving state or when we're using them, we're in this emotional brain, it's impossible to get into that rational brain. It's impossible to say, okay, and I've been there and I've taught people this, it's like, okay, you're craving, right? Is there any value in alcohol? Right now you're asking somebody who's deeply in an emotional state to switch into this rational state, when instead what I'm hearing you say, which I think is really powerful, tell me if I'm on the wrong train, is, okay, so now you're feeling anxiety, stress, fear, and all these other emotions that are leading you to crave. Stay in that emotional mindset, but change your emotions. So think about your ideal, visualize what you want to become, and feel the emotions and sensations of that new body. Feel the emotions and sensations of that new person, right? The joy and the happiness and the love and the health of the pink lungs. Feel the freedom of getting the air in. So now you can stay in that kind of part of your brain, but you're just focusing on different types of emotions, if that makes sense, right?
Right. But sometimes the pain, you talk about, because I actually, in my want communication, it's like the emotional and the rational, right? Emotional can't handle pain. It wants to do everything to take that sugar and feel good.
Mm.
The rational, feel, think, act, not feel, react, think later.
Mm.
So if I'm having a feeling and it's painful, that's rational. Then I can actually sort out what is it that I want and what is it I don't want. And then I can act from there. I got to slow it down long enough. So emotional is cannot handle pain. Rational is can handle pain. Emotional is run by shoulds, like those bad shoulds. You should not eat that. You should not eat that. You should eat this. You should blah, 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 blah. No. And rational is what is it that I want? What is it that I don't want? I want to be able to put my kid away, go watch TV, enjoy the evening with my wife or do whatever, right?
Mm.
So, and then emotional is also this idea of criticism and guilt, but rational is what's the cost factor? What's the price? And what's the prize? So I actually have that in a chart somewhere. So this emotional side of ourselves can be like this animal side of ourselves that is fight, freeze without thinking, habitual.
Mm.
And the rational is feel, have an emotion. Hey, what am I? Dialysize my emotions. So now I can name the feeling and what is it I want? What is it I don't want? And then I can act.
Mm. I like that.
So did I lose you? Yeah.
No. There's something that I always talk to my clients about. I think it's from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Is that it's putting a gap in between stimulus and response, right? Like something's happened, I'm going to eat sugar, or I'm going to drink, or I'm going to smoke, or I'm going to take cocaine, and that usually that gap between stimulus and response is really short. Like we are a robot, right? We just go into it. It's like the brain's like, that's what we do because that just happened. And it's reading your book and using the tools that you've got in there, for example, to just give yourself a pause. And the more you can give yourself that pause, the less likely you are to go for the old response. And the more likely you can replace it with something else. That's what I was thinking about when you was just talking about that then, So the recovery cycle, a practical guide to loving your sober life. Why that book, that title, and why on earth did you go down this route of giving back? Because a lot of people, they just get on with it and that's it. They just go on being a farmer or whatever. They don't write books. What was it about you that you went up to the next level?
Well, I was in a graduate class and I saw somebody, the professor wrote on a whiteboard. I love whiteboards. He put the addiction cycle up on the whiteboard. And as he was explaining it, I had many years of recovery at that time. I really, in my mind's eye, I saw the recovery cycle just sort of fall into place, sort of as a complementary teaching tool to show students or professors or anybody in recovery what the process of recovery will look like, what it entails. It's basically a visual representation of an emotional journey. And as the addiction cycle is, it's a visual representation of this hellish journey, right? So the recovery cycle is this visual representation where you can see the recovery, you can see where you are in recovery and how, if you've gotten off track, to insert yourself back into the process of recovery, regardless of what program. So I thought it was really valuable, especially now when there's so many ways to get sober, so many different kind of programs. There's yours, the Strive Minute. There's Sober Curious. Which isn't really a program, but it's an entree into whatever program you choose. There's so many different options out there now. So I thought it was something I had to do. Because recovery is my life. You talked about with your wife. I mean, my husband and I practice, our recovery in our home. When we're both triggered at the same time, we take a break. We pause. We separate. One of us might be triggered. One of us not. It's okay. We can kind of deal with that. So So anyway, to answer your question, I think I answered your question that it's a process, it's not a program. And within that, I think, where addiction cycle leads to isolation, recovery cycle leads to connection, because part of it is relationship is being part of that focus I talk about. And we find relationships in these recovery rituals with other sober people. We take a lot of contrary action to change our life, slow down enough, like we change our life. We quit secondary addictions. We become the people we want to be. And then we get to tolerate and have the capacity to experience an expanded range of feelings. I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. And with that comes a greater sense of connection. And I believe to self, to others, and to whatever you happen to believe in, if it's something spiritual in nature.
You have a piece in your book about recovery rituals. And I like that because we have our addictive rituals and they're really super powerful. So yeah, flipping the coin would be equally as powerful. Talk about that a little bit, recovery rituals.
So recovery rituals are activities and I would say behaviors that support a recovery program. So activities I like to think of is yes, you can meditate on your own with a book, or like you found the book with your smoking. But for the primary addiction, activities could include that, but I would say they need to include other people, other sober people. So, and with connecting with other sober people, we learn all kinds of things. I know in my experience we learned not only how to, stay sober and maintain sobriety, but as you've been sober a long time, it's more than just not drinking. I mean, if it was just that would be, if we were just focusing on that, that's not a great place to be. You'd end up just a dry drunk, right? It requires much more than just not drinking. I think we have a lot of energy. Compulsive people do. Compulsive people usually end up the ones that are drinking a lot or using a lot. So these rituals help, I think, define a greater sense of first of all, they provide people that are sharing their experience, right? So if other people are sharing their experience with me, whether in a group or one-on-one, I'm now hearing somebody else's thought process about life, about all kinds of things, not just about drinking, but about how they deal with at work, how they are in their relationships. And by hearing that, I think the recoverer, myself included, we can then start to do that with our own selves, like you did. We can kind of sit with our own self and reflect on, how do I relate to that? What do I do? And so I think these recovery rituals are really important just for this idea of being able to have a sense, learning how to reflect on our own thoughts and feelings, being able to sit and observe them. And yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things about recovery rituals, and there's so many different kinds now. It's like calling your sober person, going to your sober coach, running something by somebody, calling somebody every day, going and sitting in a meeting. There's all kinds of rituals out there to do. It's just a matter of finding the one. The most important part is got to have meaning for you. Like if I'm going to go do a ritual, I remember going to church and saying, why are we sitting down and standing up in these pews? Why are we sitting? I don't understand the guy. He's speaking in Latin. It had no meaning for me. So these recovery rituals need to have some sort of meaning, and they need to speak to me personally for me to engage with them and with the people in a meaningful way. And might not like everybody at these rituals. So I've got to find, or I don't have to, but it would be good for me to find the people that where I feel supported and feel cared for, that I care about.
Yeah. The word that came up for me then was enjoyment. So I always used to say to strivers, don't forget, so the Strive method is like 6 months long. It's like over 120 assignments, right? And I'm like, keep doing it, embrace the grind, and get into it and enjoy it, have fun. And people would say it's not fun. And I would say, well, if you could find a way to make it fun, I mean, a ritual needs to be meaningful. I think a ritual in itself is something that is practiced and to the degree that it becomes really important to you, and it is something that is it's going to be very difficult for you not to do it. Like, you know what I mean? But I think in that is enjoyment. I enjoy sitting down in a room of 100 people and telling them my deepest, darkest secrets. Like I enjoy it. Like I feel a sense of release. I feel a sense of connection, and it's so interesting to me that someone else could just be absolutely horrified about that. But I've yet to meet anybody who gets to the other side of it and then we say, so how does it feel now? That doesn't say, well, actually feels pretty good. Yeah, it feels good now, right? Like it's yeah, rituals. Yeah, enjoyment.
Yeah, but you know what? And rituals can be fun. It's like they don't like
Yes.
if I'm finding meaning in just having a laugh with somebody at the joke or at whatever is being said, that is enough.
Yeah.
You know, that is enough. I remember in the beginning, like I said, I didn't talk very long. I just didn't talk out loud. I just hung out with people that I felt safe with, and you know, we had a lot of fun.
What is it in your book that you're most proud of? The thing there that because you know, we're all con artists, right? We all like rip off and borrow and steal bits and bobs that we either got from AA or we got from Alan Carr's book, but then we put a little spin on it, and that's kind of mine. Like I merged this and created mine, and I'm really proud of that. You know, so for me, with the Stride method, my understanding, philosophical understanding of what I call the invisible, violent, and dominant belief system, right? I'm really proud of that, right? What is it that you're really proud of that you know really helps people, that you can stamp and say, yeah, that's Joy Andreoli's?
The cycle itself. Because the cycle itself is something I see as like this great teaching tool, which I use here. And it is completely, I don't even want to call it mine. It was completely inspired and came from somewhere, but it's not anywhere else. So but what I do know is rituals, like, you know, spiritual practices support this idea of recovery rituals. Contrary action, there's studies that support that that's actually beneficial. You can desensitize to what might feel painful or fearful, and you can move beyond it. So there's studies that support that. I'm actually thinking maybe I need to do a study on this to see if these 4 points really correlate to longer term sobriety and actualization, which I think they do. So what I'm proud of is this creation, and that I completed it and didn't let it just be an idea in my head, because, you know, you can have a creative idea. Yeah. You're a creative person. Yeah. Sometimes I just let those things go. And when I first started college, that first year in sobriety, the teacher said to me, a professor said to me, I wrote a story. She said, "Oh, I don't think you're a very good writer." And I thought, or something like, that's what I heard. I don't think she said those words, but that's what I heard. I converted it, right? And I put that away for a long time. And I kept doing what I was doing, and I went to the other field. But I'm so glad that I completed this particular project, because recovery, I think, is just a mind-blowing trip and so fun and so painful at the same time. It's a paradox, right? And I completed something that I set out to do, and I've learned a lot along the way about myself, about publishing, about how to write, how to be a better writer, how to communicate better. And I've taken a lot of contrary action to stretch. And for me, that's what my whole life is about, is just stretching in ways that are going to help me grow, and help me in particular grow spiritually, meaning connecting with others and carrying a message that I think is really important one to carry.
Well, I'm glad you came on today to convey that message. It's been really great talking to you, getting to know you. Do you know what? I got all my hands up here. I didn't even know you'd sent me a copy of your book. My apologies. I actually put in my Asana to download it and start reading it tonight. So I apologize.
Oh, you know what? You may want to consider reading my book and having me back to talk a little more about it.
We will do that, Joy.
I think you'll like it.
Yeah.
I think you like it. Check me out. And it's really, I'm very proud of it. And I think you'll like it. I think it'll resonate with you, with who you are. You've really, it's been really a pleasure talking to you and hearing what your story is. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I mean, anybody who gets a book out there, that's pushing yourself to your comfort zone and breaking through to the other side, and those things, I found those things really important. For me, it was massive being someone that doesn't drink alcohol. It was huge for me. But then quitting my job was massive. Going through a divorce was huge. Falling in love again, massive. Creating my own company, massive. That boulder just kept on rolling, which meant it was really difficult for me to go back because the momentum that I was picking up, and it sounds like you're doing the same thing. So I really honor you for that.
Yeah, you're back at you.
And you're in California, yeah?
I'm in California, yeah.
Well, I will be there soon, so I'll check you out. We'll go and have a cup of tea. Yeah.
All right. So nice to meet you.
And you, Joy. You take care of yourself.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the 1000 Days Sober podcast. Without you, the listener, there is no podcast. So thank you for stepping up today. Please go to your podcast player, rate and review the show. It will help people get to know about it a little bit more and we can save some more lives. I just want to say a special thanks to our producer, Stan, who is currently in the Ukraine. If you would like to help and support Stan and his family, email us at thestrivemethod@gmail.com and we'll find a way to do that. Special thanks to all of our guests who make this show so magical and our Strive family for uniting in our common goal to be people who don't drink alcohol and live self-led lives. And if you want to join us, email us at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you enjoyed this show, tell somebody about it. You could seriously change somebody's life. Strive on, everybody.